Why does one non-rev get the upgrade and the person right behind them doesn't? Sometimes it's the system working exactly as designed. Sometimes it's a gate agent deciding to be generous. And sometimes it depends entirely on which airline's culture you're standing in front of. Welcome back to Standby Secrets. I'm Frank Hardy, and last episode I told you something that's fundamentally true. If you only bought the economy fare and business happens to be wide open, you're not getting upgraded. That's still the rule, but it's not the whole story. And today, I want to show you why. You already know pieces of this from episode 4. On One World carriers, the standby list is built on the Sabre platform, and a D1 traveler checking in 1 minute before boarding still goes ahead of a D2 who checked in the night before. Delta and United run their own systems. Different platform, comparable mechanics. That part is mechanical. The agent isn't making a judgment call on any of it. The system hands them an ordered list, and they work it top to bottom. Here's something worth knowing before we go further, because it surprises people. Families get split up. Parents in business, older kids in coach, seats scattered across the cabin. Sometimes even split across 2 different flights entirely. One parent and a child on this one, the rest on the next. Older kids can travel alone when it comes to that. None of that is a non-rev penalty. Airlines do the exact same thing to revenue passengers when a flight is tight. It's just how the math works when there aren't enough seats together. So, if the list is the list and splitting is normal, what's actually left for the agent to decide? Svetlana saw this firsthand not long ago. She was flying to see her sister in DC right before the 4th of July, and the flight went red at the last minute. She figured she was getting bumped. A revenue family of 3 was sitting on the list ahead of her, and the agent offered them 2 seats on that flight, with the third going out 3 hours later on the 1 p.m. They said no. All 3 decided to wait and fly together on the afternoon flight instead, because it was wide open. And because that family declined the split, the seats they would have taken opened back up, and Svetlana and another non-rev got on. That's the split system working from the other side of it. It's not just about non-revs getting separated. Sometimes a revenue family choosing to stay together is exactly what clears the standby list. That's the mechanical side. And sometimes, like with Svetlana's flight, it's someone else's decision that opens your seat. But not every call at the podium comes from the list or from another passenger's choice. Some of it comes from the agent themselves. Here's what the list can't tell them. It can't tell them how a 3-year-old is going to handle a 9-hour flight versus a calm 13-year-old who's flown 30 times. It can't tell them whether the family at the podium looks like they've got this handled, or looks like the next 6 hours are going to be a problem for everyone around them. It can't tell them if you're dressed like you respect the privilege you're using, or like you rolled out of bed on your way to the airport. None of that's on any screen. It's not supposed to be. But agents are human, and humans read a room, especially when the call in front of them is discretionary, and there's more than one reasonable way to make it. I want to be careful here, because there's no formula, and I'm not going to pretend there is one you can game. What I can tell you, from 38 years of watching this from every side of it, is that the travelers who get the benefit of the doubt tend to share a few things. They're dressed like they respect what they're using. They're calm at the podium, even when they're anxious inside. If they have kids with them, those kids are visibly, obviously going to be fine on that flight. That's not a guarantee. It's a tilt. Over enough flights, tilts add up. And sometimes that judgment goes further than U.S. domestic courtesy. It crosses into territory the system was never designed to reward at all. Because once you leave your own carrier and step into the Z world, agent discretion doesn't work the same way everywhere. On some international carriers, it's forbidden outright. The agent isn't allowed to upgrade a Z passenger past what they paid for. Full stop. Company policy. On others, it's not forbidden, it's just never considered. It's cultural. Ask about an upgrade, and you might genuinely get, if you wanted business, why didn't you just buy the ZLB? And then there are carriers that are nonchalant about it. Flexible, informal, never advertised. But it happens. Not unlike how it works here at home. This is where that exception I mentioned earlier shows up. Not a system clearing affair, not an agent bending policy, just a person on a specific day deciding to be generous. This happened to me on a ZME ticket, Warsaw to Frankfurt. Before I knew any of what I've just told you, before I understood the difference between what I'd bought and what I could ask for. The gate agent was German, and I happened to speak fluent German. We got to talking at the podium. Nothing planned, nothing strategic. I just talked to her the way I'd talk to anyone. A few minutes later, she upgraded me. I still don't know why. Maybe it was the language. Maybe hearing her own language from an American caught her off guard in a good way. Or maybe she just felt a little sorry for the guy who didn't know to buy the ZMB for a few extra euros. I've turned it over more than once, and I honestly couldn't tell you which one it was. Possibly both? What I can tell you is this. No fare bought that seat. No priority tier earned it. It was one person in a nonchalant carrier culture deciding to be generous. That's the exception to everything we just covered. And you can't plan for it. You can only be the kind of traveler someone might want to be generous to, if the moment ever comes. Here's something worth understanding before we wrap up, because it changes how you should think about everything we just covered. Just a few decades ago, upgrading a revenue passenger was almost unheard of. It happened when a flight was severely delayed or canceled, and the airline needed to make it right. Compensation, not generosity. Beyond that, premium cabins mostly sat there, half empty, waiting for whoever had the seniority or the standing to claim them. That's not the world anymore. Travel clubs, credit card rewards, airline loyalty programs, all of it has turned first and business class into something people actively chase, earn, and redeem for. Those seats aren't leftover space anymore. They're inventory, competed for by people who planned years for them. Which means the margin, the empty seats that used to just sit there for a gate agent or a flight attendant to hand out on a whim, is smaller than it's ever been. Every upgrade decision an agent makes today carries more weight than it did when I started in this industry, because there's fewer seats to be generous with. That's not a reason to give up on this. It's a reason to understand exactly what we've been walking through, because in a world with less room for luck, the mechanics, the judgment, and the exceptions matter more than they ever used to. On some carriers, the tier rule is absolute. If you're holding a Z low fare, they may move you up within that same structure, Z low to Z medium to Z high, but they will not cross you out of the cabin you paid for. Economy stays economy, full stop, no exceptions, no matter how the loads look. And even within that stricter world, it's not absolute. On that Emirates flight, we were holding a Zone 5 business fare, not a Zone 5 economy. Had we been holding economy, we'd have been in the back. No question, no exception. The floor is real. You don't cross from economy into a premium cabin on these carriers, period. But within that floor, there was still room to move. Technically, the fare chart would suggest we needed the next tier up, Z High Business, to clear into first. We didn't have it. Emirates moved us anyway, that day on that flight. So even inside a region or airline with a reputation for rigid tier rules, there's a difference between the hard floor, cabin class, and the softer ceiling above it, where a carrier's culture, the specific flight, and the loads that day can still work in your favor. On the cultural side, I don't have a story to hand you the way I do with Warsaw. This one's more of a pattern I've noticed than something I can prove. It seems to show up more with some of the smaller carriers, where an upgrade request tends to land as a genuine non sequitur rather than a refusal. Not hostility, just a different cultural default about what you're supposed to expect for what you paid. So, where does that leave you the next time you're standing at a podium? First, understand what's mechanical and what isn't. The list, the priority tier, the check in window, that's fixed, and no amount of charm changes your position on it. But the room above that list, the calls an agent makes when there's more than one reasonable answer, that's where everything else we've talked about today lives. Second, control what you can control. Dress like you respect what you're using. Stay calm at the podium, even when you're not calm inside. If you've got kids or grandkids traveling with you, make sure the agent can see at a glance that they're going to be fine on that flight. None of that guarantees anything, but over enough flights, it adds up in your favor. Third, know before you fly whether you're dealing with a carrier that bends or one that doesn't. If you're holding anything less than the cabin you want, some carriers will never move you up to it, full stop. Others might. Knowing which kind of carrier you're standing in front of changes what's worth even asking for. And last, remember that sometimes it isn't mechanics or judgment at all. Sometimes it's just a person, on a good day, in the right mood, deciding to be generous to a stranger who didn't ask for anything more than a smile. You can't plan for that. You can only be the kind of traveler someone might want to be generous to, if that moment ever comes. That's what's actually happening on the other side of that podium. Not a formula, not a guarantee. A mix of a system, a culture, and a person. And now you understand all three. If this kind of insider knowledge is what you have been looking for, subscribe and hit the bell. Every episode on this channel is built for non-rev travelers navigating the standby system, retirees, and everyone flying with them. Drop a comment and tell me your best upgrade story, or the one that got away. I read every one. Next time, the part of buddy passes nobody talks about. How to handle it when things get awkward between friends. Plus, what they need to know before you hand them the pass, and the mistakes that trip people up. I'll see you in the next video.